Oh man, I am so excited to have today's show, the Successfully Unemployed show. I'm super excited to have you guys here. And today I'm bringing on an entrepreneur, somebody who started quite a few businesses. Started with a digital ads company, as well as now he's moved into more of being a brand and writing books. I am really, really excited to bring on Grant Sabatier on this show from the millennialmoney.com. He also has a book, and we'll talk about that. But Grant, thank you so much for being on the Successfully Unemployed show.
Glad to be here, man. We've known each other a couple of years. It's great to finally, dive deep like this.
Absolutely. I loved your story when I heard it a couple years ago, and we started talking a little bit after some conferences and stuff like that, and got to know each other a little bit more. And I wanted to show your story to my audience because you're a normal person just like me, just like your next door neighbor, just somebody that's like, hey, this is what I've done. Let me show you how to do it, which is fantastic. So I'm really, really glad you're on. Now, I want to jump right into it. So how do you make money now to provide for your family, yourself and your family, without having that job, that just over broke job?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's important to note that I'm really in, I'd say, my third act of life. So I just turned 35. I feel like I've lived many lifetimes. And really, I'm in the mission driven phase of my life. And we'll talk a little bit about how I got there. But really, money for me now is really kind of a bonus. So I became financially independent at the age of 30 by launching a digital ad agency, and then I started really my passion project, which was millennialmoney.com, to really share everything that I'd learned about personal finance and money. Through that process, starting in 2015, I pretty quickly realized that I wasn't just building a personal blog, I was building an online platform. And so when you think about making money online, a lot of people really kind of hyper focus on one particular area. Maybe they want to launch a course, maybe they want to launch a podcast or a blog. For me, I viewed it all as a playground. So I'm going to get myself out there. I'm going to see what I enjoy. I'm going to see what opportunities open up. And that's one of the things, having too narrow of a focus often will hold you back, especially when it comes to making money online. So through millennialmoney.com over the past 5 years, I've made money about probably 30 or 40 different ways. Everything from advertising to affiliate marketing to course sales to I had a membership site to writing a book to consulting to speaking to, I mean, everything you can name it. And a lot of that came pretty organically through building the platform and being open to the opportunities. So I kind of launched the site and wasn't making any money at all. And it was my passion project. After a year, I started making some decent money. And then I think I probably went too far too fast. I launched a membership area that was really overwhelming in a lot of ways. I launched two successful courses. And so now I'm actually at the phase where I'm scaling back a little bit because I really know what I enjoy doing. And for me, it's not about the money. It's about, do I like my life? Am I having fun? Am I growing? Am I being creative? And so I have a book deal with Penguin Random House. My first book came out last year, Financial Freedom. And then on the website side, in the finance space, personal finance blogs are kind of dead. That market's changed considerably since 2015. And so the most important thing that I've learned in business is everything's changing all the time. The most successful business people tend to be the ones who don't hold on too tightly to an idea. They're constantly able to adapt, even when there's uncertainty, and figuring out how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think is a good way to put it, and just continuing to adapt because especially in the online space, it changes so rapidly. And that's not, I'm not saying that to scare you in any way. That's actually a great opportunity for you because things are evolving. There's always an opportunity to get in and carve out your own niche. But for me, it's about finding that balance between what I really love doing, even if it means making a little bit less money, and continuing to love my life. Because at the end of the day, an online business, being successfully unemployed, as you talk about it, it's about, do you enjoy your life, and is money helping you do that? It's not just about making as much money as possible, because with anything, even with forms of passive income, there's going to be some form of trade-off.
Yeah, those are great points. And I would also add on to that, I'm in the same boat. So I invest in real estate. I have 30 plus properties, and I literally just don't have to work, but having fun is what I like to do. But I like doing business. And that's where I have fun. And that's why I started Master Passive Income, my other site, where I teach people how to invest in real estate. And then I started Successful Unemployed because I was like, there's so many people that want to not work a job, that just overbroke job, but not everybody necessarily wants real estate. They want to do like there's so many different ways to do it. And so I thought, you know what? It's not about the money. It's about helping more people because, like, just being a normal person, just like your neighbor next door, we're just helpful. Like, hey, this is what I did. Let me show you how to do it. So I think that's fantastic. Now, before you started the digital ad agency and then moved into millennialmoney.com and writing books and now having a summit where you're actually having a conference, a big conference, all that stuff is great. Talk to us a little bit about before when you had when you I think were you living out of a car, or so there was something that was like not the best in your life, and then you built out of that and then you eventually went on your own. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll give you the 2 minute, 3 minute backstory. So, I grew up an only child. My parents came from no money. They grew up very poor and decided to leave where they grew up and move to the suburbs of Washington D.C., not knowing anyone. And so my parents, my mother was a secretary. My dad cleaned office buildings. They kind of worked their way up. But that they invested a lot in me in the sense that they gave me a new opportunity. And so I always really felt that deep in me. Money was something that stressed them out my entire childhood. So it was something that was always very present in my life. I ended up, doing well in high school, got some money for college, and went to the University of Chicago where I studied philosophy. And we all know philosophy. I like to think I'm, very, very kind of analytical person, and so it was kind of the perfect major for me. But really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so when you don't kind of know what you want to do and everyone's telling you, what's your purpose, or, asking you what's your purpose, what's your why, I think those are some of the most stressful questions that you can ask someone, especially when they don't know what it is. And I felt pretty lost. And so I graduated college, did fine, ended up applying to a bunch of different jobs. The first job I got was, when you call an airline and they say this call may be recorded for quality assurance, I was actually the guy listening to those calls all day, which is terrible as it sounds. And I feel grateful that my first job was that, because, or first sort of real job, because it made me never want to have a job like that again. But didn't find the right fit. I bounced around 4 different jobs in about 2.5 years, got laid off twice. This is the Great Recession. And so at the age of 24, I actually had to move back home with my parents and start from scratch. And so my parents, who'd given me everything, here I was back home sleeping literally in the same bed that I slept in as a 7-year-old kid. And so that's where my journey began. And it was around this time that, I saw that my parents were getting older. I was obviously stressed about money. They were stressed about money. Their friends were stressed about money. I went to this cookout in the summer of 2010 with them and all their friends. And I was kind of like the adult kid that had to move back home. But I just listened to their conversations, and everyone was talking about money and retirement. And I was like, gosh, why are we so obsessed with money? What is it really? And so I put on, my philosophy hat and just asked that simple question, what is money? And started pretty systematically writing down everything that I'd been taught about money, or at least the big lessons, and then researching them, and found out pretty quickly that a lot of what we thought about money as a culture, a lot of what I'd been taught about money, was either incorrect, or now so old school it's obsolete, or even when it was correct, it was designed to keep you on this hamster wheel, for the next 40 years. And so once I kind of uncovered all of that, and I read Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin, that was kind of the big mind blowing book for me. Um, that set me on a trail to try to make as much money in as little time as possible and invest it. So I had to build an entirely new skill set, taught myself Google AdWords for free on Google, got certified by Google for free, and was off to the races. Got a job at a digital marketing agency, and pretty much spent the next 5 years nonstop, either working, side hustling. I launched 2 different companies. I invested upwards of 80% of my income the entire time. And so I could get my money growing for me. And it took me 5 years and 3 months to go from my parents' house to $1.25 million in investments, and that was in 2015. So That was all before I started the blog. And that's what I wrote the book about, financial freedom. It's about that 5 year time period, what I learned about money, what I think holds us back when it comes to money. And then I did my best to answer that question, which I always got asked, which was, how exactly did you do it and how can I do it too? And so I really worked hard to systematically build out a process and a framework that anyone can follow no matter where they're at, to not do what I did necessarily, but at least get a lot more time and space and freedom in their life, because there's a lot of regrets that I had as well about that journey, and I shared those too.
That's great. And the book is Financial Freedom, and it's very aptly named because what you do as you're going through the process, you're learning how to become free of having to worry about money. And I remember our first conversation that we had. We were at the end of the conference. My kids were getting busted for, trumping up and, or, running up and down the escalator, and the hotel staff was getting on them, and we were just talking about like how, and you were being much more like philosophical than I imagined somebody like having money and having sites, but you started talking about like philosophy, but also spirituality, and like everything's really comes down to like it's much more than just more like tangible money, which I really appreciated. So that was really great. Now, as you were building up your new business, the business that got you stepped away from the digital ads company. Now you have millennialmoney.com, and talk to us about that, because I completely agree with you that you want to have as men, like basically it's the same content. You're teaching the same content. Like I teach rental properties. And so with masterpassiveincome.com, I teach the same content every different way. Everything from a podcast. I have another podcast outside of this one, with books, my courses, my coaching, my YouTube, my articles. I literally have as many places as I can to be as helpful as I can to as many people as possible. Talk to us about that start. Like you started with millennialmoney.com. I also do want you to share a little story about how you realized you might have something by somebody offering you money for that. But talk to us about starting that millennialmoney.com.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that origin story was, I was obviously in the digital marketing space, so I knew it quite well, and I was passionate about personal finance. And one of the things that, because I had enough money now, I actually didn't really think about launching Millennial Money, quote unquote, as a business at first. What it really was, and I found just in life generally, if you have a stirring kind of an energy in you and a passion for something, uh, that's where the good stuff is. And it doesn't mean that you should quit everything in your life, for example, and follow your passion irrationally. If you haven't saved up a couple years of expenses. But for me, I had more than enough money. I had, actually a very successful business, and so I actually walked away from a very successful business that I could have grown multiple times over. I could still be running it. But for me, it wasn't just about the money. I realized that I had all these employees, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't happy. I was burnt out. For me, I found that I'm happiest when I'm growing, when I'm challenged, when I can do the new thing. And so I finally realized, it took me 5 years, but I had the freedom that I was craving all along. In fact, I had that freedom so much earlier on, and I just didn't realize it. And that's an important thing that I try to teach, is just, you probably have a lot more freedom in your life than you realize, or make sure that as you get it, that you take advantage of it. Because I probably should have launched Millennial Money in like 2012 or 2013, because I already had some of that freedom, and I didn't necessarily have to wait as long as I did. But I'm a big domain investor, and so I was always buying and selling domains. And so I bought Millennial Money a few years before 2012, 2013 in a domain auction, pretty cheap. I paid about $50 for it, and so I knew that, okay, I really like, obviously, personal finance. If I'm ever going to launch a blog, I thought this would be a really good name. And so when it came to 2015, I'd spent so much time helping other people build their websites, but I'd never built one for myself. I never had a blog. I never wanted to share online. I wasn't active on social media. I never really felt like I had something to say in the conversation. There's only so much time in the day, and I just didn't feel like I had anything worth sharing. But once I became financially independent, I was like, whoa, I actually did that. I made it happen. All the people around me had questions. My friends had questions. I realized that I just learned an insane amount. And not only had I learned an insane amount, I'd read almost 400 books about personal finance and entrepreneurship. It was like I got two PhDs in the subject, and I had my own ideas. Like now I finally was like, okay, here is what I think is an easier, better way. Here's how I think I can contribute. So it really started with that pure of a motive. And then the first thing that I did before I launched it was I started looking around at what else was out there. And so I didn't want to just be, another blogger sharing their story. I wanted to get the message. If I was going to spend the time, I wanted to get the message out to as many people as possible. And often excuse me, financial independence, financial freedom, these are big topics. And so the idea of reaching financial independence in 5 years or retiring early, or saving, over $1 million, those are massive goals. And I didn't want to just come out the gate with that. I wanted to meet people where they are and try to pull out and distill those most important pieces that had the biggest impact for me. So I wasn't going to launch like a fire blog. I wanted to launch something that was very shiny in terms of a brand that people could grasp onto. People, I knew pretty immediately that I wanted this to feel and seem bigger than a personal blog. And it was really funny in the early days, it was just me. And, people would reach out, brands would reach out, and they'd say, they'd think I'd have a 20-person team. They thought the site was so much bigger than it was. But one of the first things I did was I actually went to FinCon in Charlotte in 2015, and I didn't talk to anyone. The reason that I actually went was to just survey the market to see what the opportunity was, who are the big players, who are the voices, how are they doing what they're doing, what's the opportunity, and I used it as a market research opportunity because I think a lot of people dive too quickly into their passion. And even for me, if I knew, okay, if I'm going to spend my time, this is my free time. Now I don't have to work for money. If I'm going to spend my free time doing this, I want to make sure that it's worth it and I'm doing it the right way. So I spent, a good 3 months thinking about this, researching this. And when I came back in late 2015, it was very clear, okay, I'm going to create a personal blog, but with a shiny brand, and I'm going to leave nothing left unturned. I'm going to be as open and vulnerable, and I have nothing to lose. I'm going to share everything and all of my anxieties, all of my challenges, and I'm just going to be me. And that was really, really scary at first, but kind of a year in, what started happening is, I'd go through these spurts. And this is one of those things where you read all this about consistency is the key to success and, just barrel down. One of the things that I'm terrible at is consistency, just in all areas of my life. I can't put out a podcast once a week to save my life. But what's interesting is that I tend to somewhat prolifically follow my energy and my passion. And so, during 2015, I wasn't writing, 3 times a week. Sometimes I'd write 7 blog posts in one week and then 0 blog posts. But what I was doing was just putting out an incredible amount of content in a somewhat disorganized way. And that actually became my asset. And so one of the things that I learned is that the entire world is often built around patterns and rhythms. So things are happening at the same time. And I actually went against that, and it served me really well. And so I have a podcast, the Financial Freedom Podcast. I've only done 17 episodes. I'm sitting on about 40 yet to be released. But one of the reasons I only release them every month and a half is one, because I'm lazy and I'm a perfectionist, and two, it creates scarcity. And that's one of those things where people really hunger for the content. And so I found out that principle, and it started working really, really well for me. And then by mid 2016, a couple people started reaching out to me asking to buy the website. There were individual people wanted the domain. They saw that it was getting some traction, and then a private equity firm actually reached out because they wanted it as well. And so once that happened, I was like, okay, this is bigger and can be bigger than I even realized. And this is an important thing in any type of business is I think a lot of people get too and money and in money they get too far ahead of themselves. They're like, how do I save or make $1 million, or how do I get here, or how do I get 1 million podcast downloads? But there are steps to anything, and it's important to, as you get to each step, not only evaluate how well you're doing, but also how it makes you feel. And so that was one of the things where I started to get some traction. I also got some of these offers, and I reflected on, okay, I enjoy doing this. I'm having fun. I see a bigger opportunity here, and always kind of listening to where you're at. And that forced me to kind of double down. And so over the last 5 years of Millennial Money, there's not a consistent posting schedule. The blogs evolved 4 or 5 times. I consider business kind of like seasons, where I had my really, really hard foundational, here's my first 250 posts, I'm grinding. Then I actually had to take some time off, and then I launched a podcast. And it's this very fluid approach where I haven't burnt out. I haven't, B, it's allowed me to try a lot of different things, and then C, it keeps it really interesting, because at the end of the day, that's really, really important too. I know a lot of successful entrepreneurs who they either burn out, or they just get tired of doing what they're doing, or they just don't hang around long enough to be successful. Because right now, you think, my book was a bestseller, it's in 12 languages, and people are like, oh, you blew up, or this all happened so fast. And it's like, no, I've literally written over 1 million words about money, and the only way that you can do that logically or sanely is being interested and passionate about a particular topic. I don't know why I'm so interested in personal finance. I don't know where it comes from, but I just am. I mean, it gets me excited. It's what I think about. It's something that I still read a ton about. Now I'm in the phase where I can support other writers who are doing it, which is even more fun in some cases than writing myself, because you can see all the different voices and the up and coming people. But yeah, I mean, that's really kind of the origin story of the site. And since 2015, now over 30 million people have been to the site. We're at almost 1 million visitors a month. It continues to grow. It's evolved a lot. Now I've got many different writers, and like anything, it's gotten bigger, and it does take more of my time. And so I'm constantly thinking about, how do I continue to build this into my life and not let it take me over? Because that's the thing about making money online. You could spend 24 hours a day
There's always
doing
something to
it.
do. Yeah.
Always something to do. And the key is, how do you do a few things really well? How do you adapt? And how do you also just let go a little bit so you can focus on the long game? Because the impact, that where I am now is based just as much around the passion that I had, as well as just keeping at it and adapting. And I probably would have burnt out if I posted 3 times a week every week. There's some bloggers out there that I really look up to, that have done that for years. And some of my heroes, some of my blogging heroes, in the past year and a half, I've been able to leap over them in terms of traffic and reach. And I think, and I wasn't more disciplined, and I've been doing it in half the amount of time. And I attribute the only way that I've been able to, or one of the reasons I've been able to do that, is because, I'm able to keep it fresh and interesting for myself. I just launched a YouTube series yesterday, with Jamila Souffrant, called The Money Collective. And that's something that just came out of a conversation she and I were having. And I was like, let's do a YouTube series. And she's like, yeah, let's do it. It's something as simple as that keeps it fresh for me and interesting. I don't know how I'm going to grow it, how I'm going to scale it. YouTube's one of those platforms that I'm interested in, but the ROI, it takes just so much time to build something big. But I was really interested in the conversations that we were having. So I was like, let's just get this out there. We'll see what happens.
So I think it's fantastic now, the direction that you have taken the business, and you've reached out and you've done so many things, for everything from, number one, starting millennialmoney.com, and then writing so much content and putting it out there. And I mean, if you started back in what 2012, 2015, and started building from there, it's not like it's overnight success. I mean, you've worked your tail off to get there, and now you're branching out to where you're, like you said, having the YouTube channel or the series that you're having. And on top of that, writing the book, having courses, all this stuff. And I liked how you said you're scaling back to you figure out what's working the best for you. Then you're also having a conference. Now, if somebody listening to this would say, I see what Grant is doing. It's a fantastic opportunity. I want to be where I have my own conference. And like that's the end goal is having a conference. And then let's scale back or walk backwards from there. So the end goal is conference, walk back to where then I have a lot of influence. I also write a book. I have courses. I'm helping people. I have my site. I have a podcast because I completely agree with you. I'm also the same mind where if I did once a week or 3 times a week posting an article, I would just go nuts. Like it's just not in me. I have like a season, like you said, I just get a bunch out all at once and then I take a break, and that's just what happens. But if somebody were to start, is that the best way to go? Like, what's the first way to start if they want to eventually get to where they have a conference and they're influencing lots and lots of people? Where should they start?
Wow, wonderful, wonderful question. Um, I think a lot of people start in the wrong place. I think they see, a path that someone like maybe I've taken, or someone even a lot bigger like a Tim Ferriss, and they're like, This is how I'm going to go." And there's all these books about how to become, an influencer, build an online brand, and they all tend to be very similar, which is like create all this stuff. Or you get the Gary V model that's just like create, just get as much content out there as possible. And that worked really well for Gary Vee and continues to work well for him because he had such an early mover advantage. But now we're at a point where there's a saturation of content. So there's so many podcasts, there's so many voices. And that doesn't mean there's still not an opportunity, but the most important first step, without a doubt, is find your voice. And finding your voice is both easier and maybe harder than you think. It's like anything, it just takes some time. And so when I first started blogging, I sounded like everyone else. Like even, like going back and reading what I wrote, it's like, like it's funny, it's fun. It's like, you don't even recognize that person. And it's like anything else, you got to put in the reps. And so, what makes a writer? It's someone who writes. I mean, what makes a pod? It's someone who podcasts. What you continue to get better the more you do anything, and it's easier to do that if you're really passionate about it. And the other thing is, people, especially now, people are smart. They can see through the crap. They can see when people are faking it. They can see, who the real deal is. And so the only way to be that is to truly be yourself, to leave it all on the floor, and to pick and choose when you do something. And so, I think about the book, um, just because it's the biggest, kind of professional achievement in my life. It's pretty easy to go out and write a book. You can go self-publish a book, you can get editors, you can get a designer, you can go pump one out. I mean, people pump them out all the time. Pretty easy to write a book. Extremely, extremely difficult to write a good book. Extremely difficult. Those are two different things. And so for me, I went in thinking, that, okay, I'm going to write this book. I've written all this on the blog. I've become a better writer. And man, I got this book deal with Penguin Random House. And the first 30,000 words I sent my editor, she literally wrote back, "I don't know if you can do this." And
Ouch.
yeah, and I mean, I needed to hear that.
Hmm.
It was true. It was true. Um, and it's like anything else. I realized that I didn't know how to write a good book, and so I had to figure out how to try to write a good book while writing the book. While I mean, it was immensely, immensely challenging. And this is the thing that I realized through that process. At the end of the day, say in 50 years, when I'm on my deathbed and I'm looking back at my life, what am I gonna what would I regret? And it's not how well the book did or didn't do. Of course, I want it to have the biggest impact as possible, but all that I can control is hopefully looking back and remembering that I did the best that I could with the time that I had, even when, of course there were people looking over my shoulder because I had editors and those things, but at the end of the day, you create your own measure stick for your life, and there wasn't someone sitting here looking over me at my computer as I was, writing late. And so I wanted to leave it all on the floor. And that's all I could do. And so, I think like a lot of things in life, that comes down to, where do you start? Are you leaving it on the floor? Are you honest with yourself about, is this working or is this not working? Are you enjoying it? Yes, being an entrepreneur is hard and it sucks sometimes. You got to get through those things. But if it's really hard and you don't like your life, then it's time to pivot or reevaluate. I see a lot of people that it's just volume, 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 volume. But finding your voice, and the only way to do that is to start getting stuff out there, getting feedback, reacting to it, adapting, seeing how it makes you feel. And then at the end of the day, we're talking about content creation. This is all about connecting with people. We're all struggling in our own lives. Life is hard. It's really, really hard for some people. It's getting harder. We're living in a really, challenging, increasingly challenging time. That there's an incredible opportunity to do what you love and share, your perspective. And that's what people want to connect with. And if they connect with you, that connection goes both ways. Me as a writer, the only reason I'm a writer is because people read, what I'm writing, and then that relationship is formed, between that content. But finding your voice, being honest, is really the first step in my opinion.
I think it's fantastic. I completely agree. And I want to touch on something, make sure everybody gets this, that in order to find your voice, you have to start using your voice in order to hone it and to shape it and to figure out that didn't work. That did work. Get rid of what didn't, keep what did, and keep moving forward. Because if you never get started, you're never going to grow. So I love the idea of finding your voice. Now, once we find our voice, let's say we know we love talking about, let's say I'm a guy, so I'm gonna think barbecues. All right, but if a woman might be talking about plants, or what, I'm not sure exactly what anybody else would pick, but they pick something and they're gonna niche. And we know, we've heard many times that you want to niche down. You don't want to be so broad that nobody knows exactly what you're talking about. So we find our voice. We start maybe going after a niche. Like what after we find our voice, we've started writing things and we're passionate. We know what we know, that we're passionate about this. We keep moving forward. What would you say is the next step that we should go down?
Yeah, and so yeah, great question. It's important to note that you're always going to be finding your voice. It's always going to be changing, because at the core of life is change, and that's one of the most important things as well. Is we often try to hold on really, really tightly to not only who we think we are, but what we think that our business should be as well. And so being able to continue to adapt. And so let's get back to that niche question. At the end of the day, you shouldn't find a niche. You need to let the niche find you. And that comes down to testing a few things that you think might work and seeing how you feel and seeing if you enjoy it, and then mixing that. So pairing that type of a how do I feel research, do I enjoy this, is this fun, with very practical and realistic, a realistic assessment of the opportunity. And a lot of people, they don't do either of those things, or they do one thing without the other. And what I mean by that is, you have to spend however much time you're comfortable with researching the opportunity. And so what that means is reading all the blogs about the topic that you're interested in getting into, consuming all the best books, thinking about how your angle could be different. Why would someone even read your book as opposed to someone else's? I mean, there are, hundreds of thousands of personal finance books that get published every year. How am I going to stand out? How am I going to be different? What do I have to say? What's my angle? What's my positioning? And that takes some work. I mean, it doesn't have to be hundreds of hours, but spend 20, 30 hours reading other people's websites and books and content, and then think okay, here's my voice, here's my story, here's my lane. And is there an opportunity here? Can I stand out in a crowded market? And so when you mix those two things together, I mean, let's say real estate podcasting, as you're talking about, who needs another real estate podcast?
There are
It's like,
thousands of them. Yeah.
yeah, what's your angle? What makes you different? Who's your avatar? you hear a lot about that in marketing speak. I think there's an over focus often on that, like who's your ideal listener. If I had just thought about who my ideal millennial money reader was, I probably would have thought too narrow. Now I get emails from 13-year-olds and 75-year-olds. And I mean, it's all across the gamut. People I never would have expected would read or listen to my content all over the world. I mean, just, you don't want to think too small as well. And that's the important thing about the niche. I think sometimes people niche down too quickly. So the best advice I can give is, if you want to start creating content, if you want to start getting out there, get out there. I mean, just get out there, see how you feel, adapt. You can always delete a blog post. You can always delete a podcast. You can always pivot. You can always start over. Um, Maybe even if something is successful, but you don't enjoy it, you can also pivot as well. And so you just got to get out there. I mean, it's taking that first step. Connecting with other people is probably the third piece. So we talked about finding your voice, doing the research. What's your angle? What's the market opportunity? And then finally, third, connecting with other people who are doing it. And so this is easier to do in other industries, certain industries, but really at its core, if you're passionate about a topic, you're going to find and you reach out and you seek other people who are passionate about it. Naturally, those people are going to want to talk to you. And so, I could say that all the personal finance blogs out there are my competitors, but they're not. There's so much opportunity, there's so much need, there's so many people searching for this, that in fact, collaborating with other people, learning from them, as well as helping them as well, has, is going to have a net positive effect for you. And that's why I think a lot of people, they stay, too close, or, maybe they're too afraid to reach out to others. But you'd be surprised at even how many people email me and they're like, "Hey man, I'm just getting started. I love what you do." And then sometimes I'll email them back. It's just, you don't know who's going to respond to you. But you obviously, you miss all the shots that you don't take and you don't try. And so if someone's truly passionate about something, and I can tell that they're working on it, and they reach out to me, a couple of times, I'm much more apt to respond to them. So if you're hungry, you're really, really hungry, and you're very honest and you're open, that really shines through. People can see that pretty quickly, especially people that have already been on that path. That's why I'm so excited about helping some of these other writers, many writers who are actually older than me, but are in the money space. It's been super fun to help them because I can see how passionate they are and how unique their voice is. And the only way that I can see that is because I've gone through it myself. It's like being a basketball player and looking at being like a professional and looking at someone in college. You can very quickly tell the people who have potential. And then there's just this natural desire, I think, in all humans to help others. And that becomes fun because then you're not alone on the journey. Because often if you're alone on the journey, and you're in your basement, and you have your podcast mic, and, sometimes creating content gets really, really, really lonely. And then the last piece is just think about the long game. You're not just building a business, you're building your life. And so that for me too, writing the book took about 2,800 hours. So it took an insane amount of time. A lot of that time I was on the 8th floor, or the 7th or 8th floor of the Harold Washington Library in downtown Chicago. It was like me and, homeless people during the middle of the day. And I was just grinding it out, man. I was at I'd wake up, go to a coffee shop at 5:30 a.m. The library opened up at 9. Then I'd be at the library from 9 till 1. I'd go out and get some lunch, come back, be at the library till 4, and then try to work a little bit more. And I did that, every day for, over a year. And most of the time I was alone. And I wasn't blogging and I wasn't podcasting. But I made the selective choice. Okay, this is the deep work. This is, at the end of the day, I actually haven't read Cal Newport's deep work, but I think I get the general gist. Is at the end of the day, when you think about anything as a pyramid, anything that's harder to do, there's just going to be fewer people up there. And I really agree with that idea, because for the book, I was like, man, I really got to take, a whole year off blogging, because I couldn't put my best into both realms. And that's an important thing as well. You might have to, it's all trade-offs. You might have to do one thing really, really, really well, because that's going to be that one thing that sets you apart, and then has a compounding impact over time. So that's the thing too. Writing a book, you're doing it once, but now every moment of every day, there's 100 people somewhere in the world listening to or reading my book. So that one-time effort now ripples into the universe consistently, and that creates not only great energy, but it opens up other opportunities, to do things that then compound over time.
That's great, and I completely agree. And in fact, all the things you've been saying, that's really how I view business. Everything from like the avatar. I've never liked that word, like find your one avatar and talk to that one person. I'm like that just doesn't work for me. I know my niche is rental properties. Like that's all I talk about. I talk about flipping,
Right.
wholesaling, just rental properties, and then from there. All I do is I just keep delivering the content over and over again. I love your idea of working with other people in the space because I originally thought this was a competition. Like I can't talk to somebody else in the real estate space or anything like that. And then I realized how stupid that was. This world is huge, and no time in the history of the world has it been so amazing to start a business because of the online space. It's you can reach so many people, and that's where you and I met. That was my first conference I've ever been to for business. Was at FinCon where you and I met. From there, my business has grown leaps and bounds just by working with other people, seeing what's working for them, helping other people. I get better as I help more people. So I completely agree. So Grant, those are fantastic. So everybody that's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, absolutely, you need to figure out your voice. You also need to figure out your niche, and I completely agree. Sometimes we need to figure out exactly how our niche is, and then at the same time, be working with other people. But man, Grant, you give us so much great content, so much great insight on how to do this business. I can see how thoughtful you have in building this business, the millennialmoney.com, as well as writing the book. And then now your event, that the big conference is coming up. And I'm really, really excited to hear that. Now, you've given us so much stuff, but let's jump into the rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Let's do it, man.
All right. So the rapid fire round, broad questions, you should be able to get these pretty easily. Hopefully, we have a little bit more time after we quit our job because we're financially independent. How are you giving back, or how are you making the world a better place, or the people around you? Like, what are you doing to serve and help other people?
Yeah, I mean, literally everything that I do is designed around serving other people. And so that's where I mentioned a little earlier on, I never knew what my passion was or my why was or had a purpose. I just had to create the time and space for it to show up. And so once, I left the corporate world and started the blog, by 2016, I was getting those emails, you helped me do this, you helped me do that, you helped me, inspire me. I get these all the time now. And those emails, just fill me with so much more joy than even making the money. And so I found that kind of doubling down on the mission, um, and continuing to serve it, and that mission is very simple: make financial freedom available to everyone. And as long as I wake up every day and I'm looking through the lens of that, when I'm evaluating opportunities, it hasn't steered me wrong yet. And that's an important piece as well, because don't just chase the money, chase what you enjoy. And it's funny, even listening to you talk about millennial money and your business. Yes, they're all businesses. Yes, I have a P&L. Yes, I file a tax return, but I actually don't even think about them as businesses at all. And when you say that, I kind of get like a, oh yeah, oh yeah. I view it as my life. It all fluidly fits together. I'm not thinking about how do I maximize profit. I'm thinking about how do I maximize impact, and how I view that are things like obviously website traffic, book sales, all of those things. And so that's important as well. Is just going back to that idea of creating your own measure stick for your life. How I've built mine. Sometimes it has to do with money, and sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, so the next question is, if somebody were to get started, what's the piece of advice if they say, I'd like to be doing what Grant's doing, influencing people, helping people? What's some advice that you would give them to get started?
Find your voice. No, I think one of the things that I wish that I would have done, and I think this would be just a good place to start, is just try to think about what you want your life to look like in 5 years. and then think about, it's hard to kind of say that and then reverse engineer the process, but think about, what would an ideal day look like? What, why? And then once you do that, then dig into why do you want those things? Because we often want more money, or we want more success, or we want more fame because we think it's going to solve some problem, or it's just how we're wired, but we haven't actually dug into why do we want those things. And there's actually a really incredible Tim Ferriss post that if you have show notes, you should link to, that came out, yesterday, which was about the kind of the perils of fame. And that's, I mean, it was a great post I read this morning. And Tim Ferriss is really right on the money. I've had to deal, as my influence has gotten bigger. I've had my bank accounts hacked. I've had my phone numbers stolen multiple times. I've had threats. I've had, my online life hijacked. I've had impersonators. I've had my identity stolen, all from just being online and visible, and trying to help other people. And so thinking about why are you doing what you're doing? Because at the end of the day, with increased influence comes not only increased opportunity, but increased responsibility, and then just things that you can't even imagine. You would have to deal with. And so think about what kind of life you want, and think about whether you actually, a lot of people want fame. And there's a really great Bill Murray quote, which is like, fame's really helped me, it's helped me get into a couple of restaurants, and, that's about it. A lot of people, what they want is just validation. They want to be heard, they want to be seen. And from a content creator perspective, I can tell you now, having reached millions and millions of people, it feels great, and I feel like I'm having a massive impact, but the feeling isn't much different than those first emails that I got from people, thanking me for helping them. And so impacting 1,000 people versus impacting, say millions of people, it feels the same. And to get to 1 million people, it might not be worth the effort, and it might not be worth the challenges, and it might not be worth the added headache. And so think about why you want what you want. And at the end of the day, for me, it came back to freedom. I can get up every day. I can do what I love. I can meet amazing people. I can continue to write. I'm really excited about writing another book, continuing to grow in that way. And so, the 5-year-old me, in my sandbox in the backyard is pretty happy right now, because I can do that every day, just with a larger sandbox and more tools and more sand and a whole lot of really cool friends that I can hang out with.
That's great. And I agree. The bigger I build my business is because I reach more people and I help more people. And like you said, you get to hang out with more people. It's just more fun to be around people that are of like mind and stuff. So I completely get that. Now, next question. If you were to go back and give your younger self any piece of advice, it could be business, it could be life, whatever it might be, what would it be?
Chill out, man. Chill out. Seriously. I was actually thinking about this morning, where I thought back this morning, and I opened the fridge and I was getting ready to make some eggs, and I realized just kind of how full my fridge was. And there's all the foods that I enjoy, and my dog came up and bumped up against me, and it's just a really, the way the light was coming into my kitchen, and I just was just overwhelmed with this sense of fullness, of this I have everything that I need, and it just kind of came over me like a wave. And it was so beautiful. And then the next thought was like, why was I so stressed out for all those years? Why was I so worried? And it's one thing, stress is good if it drives you and if you're hungry, but it's a fine line, between when it's really toxic. And I think, like, I'm really predisposed to stress and anxiety. And, I would just tell my younger self, chill out. Life has a way of working out. There's a really amazing, one of my favorite quotes that just sticks with me is in the Amy Winehouse documentary, incredible documentary. Tony Bennett, who was, a huge Tony Bennett here, 95 now, still singing. He gave this great quote about, if Amy Winehouse would have just stuck around for a few more years. He said, life really teaches you how to live it. And I couldn't agree more with that. Is that, when you're 25 or even 35 and you'd say you're just starting out on your journey, there's this anxiety of, am I too late? Am I enough? And for me, I had that. I really, really had that. And, I thought that success was about money, and about, just money and hitting the goals. But in reality, for me, it was about finding peace in my life. And, you can do that with a lot less money than I had. Maybe you already have what you seek. We're so busy in our life. And, when you're stuck in your life, there's just no space for anything else to show up. And in a lot of cases, we're our own worst enemy, because the reason we're stuck is because we're the ones filling our lives with stuff that just isn't fulfilling us. And so I just tell myself to chill out and enjoy the journey, and life's going to teach you how to live it. And your 20s are crazy, and they're crazy for everybody, and it's hard, and life's always hard. In your 30s, your friends start dying, and those things start happening, and people get sick. And it's like anything in life, there's always going to be that struggle and that suffering.
Yeah.
But if you're not enjoying the journey.
Definitely having perspective. I mean, that's one great thing about getting old is not all great, but there is one good thing. You have perspective. You can look back and see where you've come from, but then you can appreciate everything that you have, especially you worked hard now. I just turned 40 recently. And so, realizing, man, my 40s are going to be great because everything I did in my 20s and 30s, I worked hard. And I agree, chilling out, it would have been helpful if I would have done that, because I was going 100 miles an hour. But now all that stuff now is paying off now. So I love the thought of chilling out. So from there, what is one tool, app? So it could be a piece of paper and a pen. Should we use in our life that helps you, that we can apply in our lives?
Number one thing that's had the biggest impact for me is, I'm just going to grab it, the Walden meditation mat. Walden.us.
And
It's
so for
pretty quick.
everybody watching this, he picked up this bag that has a meditation mat inside of it.
No, that's the actual mat.
Oh,
That's the. I just sit on that.
oh,
So
got it.
one of the things, everyone says meditation. It's great. It's great. I've been meditating for quite a while, but I didn't know meditation until I actually got, my own meditation setup. And so I travel with that thing. I try to do 20 minutes a day. Sometimes I do an hour a day. Man, mind blowing impact. Just obviously around, just stress. And not only stress, we spend all of our lives kind of looking out and moving. Just taking some time to look in and recalibrate the stuff you find, you realize that you're so much bigger than you thought that you were. That a lot of the things that you think that you want, you actually don't want. You just think you want them because other people do, or the world tells you that you should. And the more control that you can get over your mind, I always say that freedom is about freedom of mind. I mean, that's really at its core. And anything in life and in business, the more control that you have over that, as well as the more your ability to let go. And that's something that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, is once I started, not both caring but not caring as much, then new things start showing up. And so you might just be holding on too tightly to this version of yourself, or this version of your business, or this identity that you've built your entire life on, when in reality it's that holding on too tightly which is holding you back, because then you can't move on to the next thing. And so a lot of people really fear change and not knowing, but that's where the juice is. That's, even if it's scary and uncomfortable, not knowing is actually the most powerful thing in life. It's not knowing. We always think that knowing is kind of the answer, but for me, I find that not knowing, when I don't know, that tends to be where the good stuff's going to happen, because things that I couldn't even imagine start showing up. So get a meditation mat,
Start
sit down.
meditating.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of people are like, "Oh, my mind is all over the place," and they call it monkey mind. That's great. Just sit there and let your thoughts follow your thoughts. You don't even have to think about nothing. A lot of people think meditation is just clear your head and think about nothing. No, you can think. In fact, you can do some of your best thinking, but the idea is to not fixate on something. Let your thoughts wander. Don't hold on to something too tightly. And what happens is your mind starts to take you in places that you've never been before. And the more that you do that, it's like anything, you start to get more comfortable and you get more control over your mind, which just has had a massive, massive impact in so many areas of my life.
That's great. Now, last question. What is one nonfiction book that we should read outside of Financial Freedom, which we'll put that in the show notes? Everybody
Oh
should be reading
yeah.
that. What's one, because you read hundreds and hundreds of books. What's one that we should read?
Probably one my favorite is The Art of Living is one of my favorites. I've probably got it right here. The Art of Living by Thich Nhat Hanh. This book, man, is just a masterpiece. The Art of
Art of
Living. So
Living.
Thich Nhat Hanh, he's in his 90s, is a Vietnamese
Yeah.
monk. Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize back
Wow.
in the 60s. He's written Thich Nhat Hanh's written probably over 50 books, and this is his last book because he had a stroke a couple of years ago, and it is just pure magic. I mean, absolute magic. So read The Art of Living by Thich Nhat Hanh. Even if you have no interest in Buddhism, it's not even like a Buddhist book. It's just, here's my thoughts on living. Here's a guy who literally, has helped tens of millions of people and, spent his entire life dedicated to others. And that book is just so alive.
Awesome, man.
Um,
The Art of Living. Very
yep.
cool. Well, good. Well, Grant, you've given us so much great insights and wisdom. If somebody wants to reach out to you or find you online, how can they do that?
Yeah. At Millennial Money at Millennial Money com on Instagram, at Financial Freedom on Instagram. Those are two good places to connect with me. I tend to spend a ton of time much more time responding to Instagram messages than I do email. If you email me, I won't ever see it. So Instagram is a great way to connect with me. You can check out Financial Freedom, my book, just searching on Amazon. It's the bright blue book or financialfreedombook.com. And then, yeah, those are the best places to reach me and check out my work. I also have a podcast called Financial Freedom. I've interviewed Tony Robbins and James Clear and, some really incredible people around this intersection of money and life and mindfulness. And, we go really deep on all these topics. You can hear me go hard against James Clear around why I'm anti-habit. There's a lot of fun episodes there. So those are a couple good ways.
Awesome. Grant, it's been fantastic, and I'm glad we got to catch up again. Thank you very much for being on the show. I am super excited to have you. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Have a good day.
You too, buddy.
Peace.